over Dropbox or Google Drive.
So
And you can
turn that on, so
yeah, you can record it once once everyone's in.
You're gonna cue me in. Someone's gonna cue me.
Yes. Cool. Yep. So Brian will introduce you. Basically, like once Brian's like, all right, let's get this started. Let's kick it off. We got people ready to go. Then you can hit record at that point. Does that make sense?
I actually just started recording now, so
okay.
I won't forget. I've done that
Don't
before.
say anything bad.
I have done that many a time too. It's like half an hour and you're like, oh crap.
You're like a half hour into an hour thing and you haven't recorded it, and then
It's happened.
that look in your face like,
damn it. I'm just gonna, and just so you guys know, I'm gonna pop off right after. So I would stick around and see what you had to say, Zach, but I got a whole family that's sick above me upstairs, so I gotta go help them.
Oh boy.
oh no.
Yeah,
That takes priority.
we had COVID go through the household, so
That's no fun.
yeah.
Everybody feeling better? Are you on the front end or back end?
I'm cured. I'm all set and immune for however much X amount of time, and yeah, we're all mild case, so it's all good. No life threatening anything. So
That's
good.
All right, I'm gonna hide myself, but I'll be here if you need me. Brian, you can text me or chat to me privately, whatever you want to do. But thank you guys both, or I guess all three of you really. Brian, thank you for hosting. Zach, thanks for speaking, and Justin, thanks for being a sponsor.
Heck yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Well, Jeff Williams is here, so what else do we need?
More of him, right?
Jeff Williams.
So I'm a little screen happy right here, Brian, just with a million different things popping open up. So if someone does ask questions or has a segue or something like that, you have the power to bust in, man. Go for it.
All right.
In true classroom fashion, I'm very used to being interrupted and enjoy such interruptions sometimes.
There's a couple jokes there, but I'm going to leave them alone.
It's too late. 6 p.m. now.
Now I'm seeing Jeff Williams twice. That's hilarious. We did bring all this.
Said it was gonna happen.
Good.
Am I loud enough over there too, or not, or quiet enough, or?
Perfect, man.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Yeah, how am I sounding, everyone?
Awesome. Definitely. Good. Pure perfection. Annie says.
Good. I see Francis has joined us.
unaware of this news.
A lot of firsts in history. I was joking with Brian. Weren't they telling you just like, man, I wish I was back in the classroom teaching social studies. What a week.
Okay, I get the news now.
All right. Well, I'm still seeing 4 people here, everybody. So I'm wondering if there's a meeting room I'm missing, or anybody see that? But I think, yeah, I don't know. And we've had a variety of different number of participants, and we'll put it on the web. So. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. There's like 30 people waiting to get in. And... All right, well, I think we'll get started then. How's that sound, everybody?
Do it.
All right, well, hello and welcome to tonight's GLSEC at Home Talk. I'm Brian Toll, and I'll be your host this evening. The pandemic has really changed so many parts of our life, not only how we work, but how we think about networking and learning. Our hope is to get everybody together later in 2021 for our annual Software Excellence Conference. But until then, we have these online talks, and we're hosting one of these every month, just like tonight. And this is GLSEC at Home. So thank you for being here. We really couldn't do this without the support of our sponsors. The financial support is vital to what we're trying to do with Software GR and the advancements to the greater software community in West Michigan. But beyond the financial contributions, which we greatly appreciate, it's just great to have these sponsors have a chance to share what they're doing with a larger audience. And without that support and that exposure, it just wouldn't be the same. So with that, I wanted to welcome our sponsor for tonight, Justin from Brightly, and Justin, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, we've sponsored for a while now, I think, and you know, it couldn't have gone to a better cause. This community and everything. It's all about community. We're developers or technology people, so that's what we do. You know, get together, talk, make stuff happen. So, but Brightly, yeah, we're a firm here in town in Grand Rapids. I'm actually up in Traverse City working remote now. So, but we're a design-led, research-driven digital transformation company. So what do? We basically help companies with this transition into, you know, the new era of technology and Industry 4.0 and all that stuff. So we touch, you know, a lot of different facets of a project or a business. We help people out with, you know, internal processes and working with their financials, and then working on custom internal software all the way down to the manufacturing floor. So all about data consumption, reporting on it, and being reactionary to actual physical real life metrics instead of just taking a guess. So and we kind of do this in a cool way, I guess. And I kind of want to bring this up as I'm the lead developer over there, and I write code pretty much daily. So But it's a really nice way to work that we work with our clients, and we call it team as a service. So we're kind of brought in, to augment teams or be a technology team to a company that has like a design company or a design department already in place, and maybe a few technologists, and then we come in and augment and kind of fit in and work really close in the trenches with our clients and on really crazy problems. So, but just to kind of like, since this is a technology conference and, we all are interested in this stuff, I wanted to kind of share a couple things that I'm interested in as a developer working with this stuff. We've been working with this stuff for, I don't know, probably about a year-ish time. Oh, some of this longer, but a couple of these things relatively recently. And it's super exciting stuff, and technology is crazy right now. So one of the things I think we all have worked with it in some form or know about it is React.js, but they've done a recent update with React hooks and stuff like that. And I don't know if everyone's made the jump to React hooks or anything, but that changes the front end development. I think it lets you build a more scalable front end architecture. So it's really cool. And then the second one is this, I think, relatively new platform called Hasura.io, I think or Hasura.com. But basically it's a GraphQL server that or GraphQL API that builds itself, and it sits on Postgres and kind of feeds into it. And you can hook this up and make it lots of hook into a central part of your system. So you can bring your own auth, you can bring your own webhook server, you can bring your own different data from entirely different sources and kind of wrap it all up in this really nice consumable GraphQL API for your front ends. And then really the last one that I want to leave you with, which is kind of really cool, what I've been playing with a lot lately, is Terraform and just code as infrastructure in general. So bringing that idea of hosting an application architecture down into code, I think it really has like a profound effect on your team and just developers. I think it makes it easier, and especially if you work it into like CI/CD, makes it really easy to kind of just get stuff done and stop worrying about some of the back end architecture. And I came from a design path into programming, so like it's really nice to think about it as code instead of how it used to be with setting up VMs all over the place and whatever. So, but I thank you guys for letting me come and talk and sponsoring, letting us sponsor and stuff. But if you want to continue the conversation or nerd out with me more, you can hit us up at the main contact form on teambrightly.com, or just email me directly at justin@teambrightly.com. And one last thing too. There's a few people in here, and if anybody sees this recently, we are hiring. So we have a UX position open, a user experience design position. So if you know anybody, send them our way, teambrightly/careers.com. So anyway, I'll hand it back over to Brian.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin, for telling us a little bit more about your organization and about those technologies. I think it's great that you kind of plug those.
Yeah,
and
I love them.
Put a plug for Terraform. We use that all the time at SpinDance. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll kind of get on with our main event, so to speak. And I am very pleased to introduce Zach Vanderveen. Zach and I have known each other a very long time. We actually went to elementary school, high school together, and have maintained a friendship over the last, we won't say how many years, but very excited to have him. Zach is a native of West Michigan, a graduate of U of M. After school, he went on to be a history teacher. And again, as we've been catching up this week, it's been fascinating, the American history that we're going through. But after that, he moved into a technical role, first as a e-learning coach, and ultimately as the director of technology for the Hamilton, make sure I get this right, Zach, the Hamilton City School District, which is in the greater Ohio area.
Correct.
On his head. Perfect. I won't tell you too much about what he's doing today, but he did co-found Abre in 2017. Has a fascinating platform with a fascinating story, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. And I think you'll find it really interesting. Outside of work, Zach is a world traveler. He spent a sizable amount of time in Chile. Did I say that right? Chile? Close enough? And Brazil, and he loves teaching. He loves adventures with his family. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you. So Zach, thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna start off here with trying to do the screen share and hoping we all seeing the screen. Step over.
Yep, good to go, Zach.
Good to go, sweet. All right, I want to just kind of kick off here with a hello and welcome, and a big thanks for the invite. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, GLSEC. It's always good. I love coming back to the roots. Love West Michigan, and it's fun to see what's going on. So really looking forward to this conversation and talking a little bit about, the competition down south here in Ohio. So real quick, I'm going to kick off with the obligatory Who Am I slide. I am an educator. Right now, I am the VP of instruction, but I am first and foremost an educator. I am incredibly passionate about teaching students, other educators, and frankly, the larger learning community. I'm a big time learner. I have an insatiable desire to understand the world. And pertinent to this talk, I'm also an entrepreneur and a business founder, and I am learning a lot. This is where you can find me. This is my brain. Edlighten.net is really where I kind of reside on the internets. But if anyone's watching this or afterwards wants to get in contact, exchange ideas, talk the talk or shop, would love to talk greater with everyone. I also say during this conversation, if you have questions, pitch them in the chat window. I'm okay with tangents and segues, which actually leads me to the next point I want to make. In true educator fashion, I'm going to write on the board what are the 4 goals for the day, the objectives for the day. And not the day, this talk you can see right here. So really what I'm intending to do with this talk is to provide insights into the world of K-12 education, its leadership, and to some extent its technology. I want to present some lessons and observations I've had while moving out of the public sphere, which is different, and into the private sphere. I want to conclude with some pragmatic methods for using contrasting experiences to grow. That's really what this has been, and I know it can be applied to many of us. As I was saying, we'll probably have a possible tangent or two. I'm perfectly comfortable with those. When you teach, it's pretty awesome when kids like raise their hand or really just blurt out something because they're so into something. And I've always been the guy who's been good with like lots of tangents, which again, if I was teaching social studies this week or last week, I'm fairly certain the entire class period would be tangents. So I'm comfortable with that. So feel free to interact with me in those ways. But moving on, I want to start with the context, give you a little bit of an origin story to Abre. My current role is the VP of instruction at Abre, and it's a cool story. I'm proud of it. So I want to start with just kind of showing the journey and then get into the observations and lessons that I've seen as we go through. So I'm going to start right here. A couple of years ago, actually it's more like 6 years ago. No, actually it's more like 10 years ago. I was starting out as a tech director at Hamilton City School District. It's a fairly large school district actually in Ohio. And in my first year, I was pulled in by business and planning and really pretty much said almost exactly this. Hey, Zach, we've got $1.5 million to spend by summer or we lose it. Do you got any ideas? This is kind of a first quick tangent here on some insights into public institutions. Funding is strange. It's frequently complicated and carries a number of twists and turns that can make logical sense in a particular context, but to an outside observer might be like, what the, so just bookmark that for a second, because it's going to come up in a couple of the oddness of public funding and the way that public decisions are actually working. But anyway, I had some ideas. Namely, idea was, hey, let's buy a lot of Chromebooks. This is the time when you were starting to finally have Chromebooks hit the market where they had, where they were affordable, frankly, and school districts were really looking at it from the context of, we can buy these and put them in the hands of every student. So we went all in on one-to-one. And over the course of 2 years, we bought 10,000 Chromebooks. And by solving the hardware, and I'm not going into it, but to some extent the network, because that was definitely a problem we had to solve, a problem of instructional technology, we pretty much ran smack dab into the software side of the equation. And that's where we started having, well, we started having problems. So, okay, so I want to take a quick dive into how software works in education. These are, kind of generic, general statements. And really much of this talk, I want to be clear here, is like I'm pulling out some threads. There are always outliers and different views. But in general, some observations about EdTech software. The field is changing, but the field is incredibly slow to change. So a lot of what I'm about to say still holds true. If I were to sum it up, it's messy. It's really, really messy. Namely, if I were to start to dive into the mess. Now, for those of you watching this or interacting here, if you have kids, and certainly if you've had kids in school those last year during COVID, you've gone through the fun baptism by fire of all the EdTech software solutions a school uses to instruct kids. And there are a million software solutions in education. And really there's different flavors for every variance of need, each with their own particular challenge. And managing this, whether you're a tech director, whether you're a teacher, whether you're the student, or whether you're the family, it is a particular challenge. In addition to that, EdTech has problems with silos. This is probably the biggest challenge that we see. Data is stuck in a silo, and it's really cumbersome and sometimes at best impossible, as Audrey Waters says, to move data in and out of systems. EdTech is siloed, and it's really maddening. Getting applications, particularly the core applications like student information systems and state data collection systems, just takes a ton of effort. I won't go into the weeds, but there are similarities with the healthcare industry, I believe, and defining standards and getting companies to use those standards, and then educating the customer, that is the district leadership purchasing the software, to hold companies accountable is a process. It's a learning process, and it's certainly part of what it takes to make the problem decrease in its challenges. Silos create a ton of friction. Possibly pertinent to this crew, EdTech software in general really wrestles with old and bad user experiences and user interface. It's the key point I would like to say is EdTech sticks around. From my understanding, a lot of public institutions, they're running a lot of old tech as well. That's why you see sudden spurts of demand for people know how to know COBOL in order to make in our case the actual state funding system to work. A lot of EdTech runs under old the late 90s, early aughts user interface, and people who are really familiar with that, your older teachers, they give by and they're yeah, it's the way we do things, but it's kind of amusing to see the younger teachers come in because they're what is this and how does this work? And it's not intuitive at all. I had to throw this slide in because this is sort of the particular challenge. Logins and account management are the headache of a lot of tech directors and a lot of parents and students and family members. Entire companies have, rather successfully actually been launched to solve this problem. Some of you may have heard of a company called Clever, and thank God they're there because they saw this is a rather large headache. Again, this is an aspect of the siloed data problem, but it's still there. And then it's expensive. And really kind of the key part here, it's not often used. There are a lot of software products purchased by schools that really, when they combine them with only the fraction of it actually being used, it really adds to a lot of cost. One of the more recent studies out there says that 67% of all ed tech licenses actually go unused. And that gets into the particulars of how purchasing happens at schools and deployments, and parts of that are going to show up in different parts of this speech here, just to kind of to talk about how that kind of can come into focus. But it can be really expensive, which wouldn't of itself is not necessarily bad, but if it's not being used, brings up questions about, how are you using, the citizens' tax dollars to help educate your kiddos. So, okay, so with those challenges in mind, I had an idea, and I knew a guy, always know a guy, and we had this particularly gifted math teacher at Hamilton. He taught math, taught it very well, but on the side, he was just a really phenomenal web developer. So I made him 2 pitches. I said, all right, hey, come out of the classroom, come up with the board, and let's try out this idea. Let's go with it. And then the second pitch was, I went to the board, which is really, the boss in a school district, and said, hey, I'd like to try something new. It's gonna cost money, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna save the district a ton of money in a few years. Plus, I want it to be open source. And I had this idea that we'd have these kumbaya moments with other districts, and we'd develop awesome code, and everyone would be sharing, and we'd all partake in the gains. A little side note, that did not happen. And it's just kind of funny to think of some of my early views and attitudes on that have changed quite a bit. I really want to stick a pin in this for a second, because there was risk involved in this. And I really want to return to it, because risk, innovation, and conviction, false though that conviction can be at sometimes, is really important, I think, to launching a business and really going with an idea. Anyway, Chris agreed. And indeed, Chris has actually become one of my closer friends, and he's the co-founder of Abre. So he's also like the one I lean on the most, and vice versa, as we've started this adventure. But 3 months later, we had a functional MVP of what would become Abre. And you're actually seeing like one of the early versions of it right here up on the screen. But not bad. Brought him in the classroom, brought up here, and we were able to go places. In fact, a year-ish later, between year 1 and year 2, we had about 9,000 daily users. We had removed a ton of the silos. This is kind of one of the key points that stands out. We were saving our district $450,000 a year in software licenses and expenses. That number, we were in a big district, so keep that in mind. But still, that's a couple teaching positions. So a significant number, and really that number plus just some of the problems we were solving led to a lot of adoption that was starting to happen, or people were trying to launch the open source platform and getting a lot of interest from neighboring districts saying, hey, can you guys do this for us? We would like you to do this. And we started to get very, very worried. We started getting worried about the bus. There's that term out there, I don't know, it's used in education circles all the time. Like, what happens if so-and-so gets hit by the bus, i.e. what happens if all your eggs are in one basket and the basket falls? If something were to happen to Chris or I got hit by the hopefully metaphorical bus, what's gonna happen to the district in running Abre, as well as we were really starting to hit the wall of what we could do. We had too much on our plate, and we couldn't really take it further and we had ideas. So which leads us to the next part here, which we started looking for help. We started reaching out. First, we started reaching out to other districts, then to like other school consortiums. And then we really started reaching out to anyone. Really kind of one of our fun facts, one of our first hires in actual, our head developer is a Miami University graduate who had like 2 months to spare while he was waiting to get out of school and just kind of looking around to help out local school districts. He said, oh, this looks like a cool project. You guys need any help? Joined us, and really like took a little bit of load off of Chris, but then also just became a valuable employee from the start. But then we also started reaching out to many businesses, like, I'm thinking like all of you, like basically calling up and saying, hey, we've got this project happening out in the school. Do you have any time you want to volunteer or contribute? That'd be great. What a cool opportunity to work with educators and help students. This is really awesome. Because by this point, we really had like a lot of big ideas and a much bigger vision of what Aubrey could become. So we ended up in one of our reach outs touching base with Tech, which is a public and private seed stage investor. We gave like a quick demo of Aubrey, because again, we're looking for help, explaining what we've done. And they asked the following questions afterwards. It was really kind of one of these moderately surreal moments of like, so you've created a product that's used by tens of thousands and been running it for 2 years. You're saving the district $450,000 a year, and other districts want to buy this and are ready to cut checks. And we were like, yeah. And they were like, well, why aren't you guys forming a business? And really at that point, like, it was like, huh. And really, I need to emphasize, because this gets into a little bit public to private comparison and contrast right here. I want to take a quick tangent on educators and risk. We don't like it. Educators really don't like risk. In general, educators are actually pretty risk averse. They like stability. It's an actual pretty safe profession. You get good retirement. Your paycheck is pretty predictable. Yeah, there are curveballs. You know, you could lose funding and riffing and all this kind of stuff. But basically, it's a really solid and safe and wonderful profession. Whereas private, particularly this particular aspect of private, you know, a startup, was going to be high risk, very unstable, certainly a high reward, but definitely not predictable. So forming a business really wasn't the first thing to take hold in our minds. We didn't necessarily quickly gravitate to the idea. And that's a key point to understand, like, leadership, particularly as a business leader going to talk to school district leaders and understanding this context of risk and reward. It's going to come up in a couple other points here that I'm going to raise. But the key point I really want to hit here is, you know, the fear of the unknown was and really still is huge. And more on that in a minute, but I'm hoping that some of y'all can identify with that. Anyway, really quick, what is Aubrey? Not going to go into huge detail, but we are an education management platform. We really empower school students and their families, as well as third-party partners, which is really cool, which is you know, things like businesses or churches, YMCAs. We actually bring them all into the relationship with the student in the school to really help kids grow and achieve their full academic as well as you know, career potential. If you'd like to have more, we can have conversations after this this talk. But just the quick bits are real quick. Right now, we're at about, we launched Aubrey, and we're at about 600,000 monthly monthly sessions. We've got currently 300 schools, 250,000 students and staff using it. We're in 5 states. COVID-19 sucks. Had to put that out there because, like many of you, I'm sure, this past year has been interesting in all its ways, although I'm really happy to be in EdTech industry where we were able to help quite a bit of our customers and accommodate the wide and large challenges that you saw in education. But we've got 12 employees, and we are based in Cincinnati. So that's home for us. We're growing fast. You know, the last quarter, and particularly looking into 2021, now that schools have gotten through the crushing kind of hyper-focused moment of survive COVID and what does this mean? they're really starting to perk their heads up and be like, okay, we need to be rethinking a lot of the software applications we're using, as well as, and kind of mentioned it, what do we do about the whole child? Probably not a big surprise. Like one of the top trending concerns you see among district leaders right now are things like mental health, mental wellness and those kind of components. So that's a particular area of growth for where we're at. I'm gonna pause for a quick second here before I jump into the compare and contrast, grab a drink of water, and then just, again, I don't have the conversation up here, but see if there are any quick questions on that before I move into the contrasting experiences.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. We do have a question from Jeff here. He's asking, are you running into scale challenges as you grow your business, both in terms of the software, what the software can support, and how your team grows to support people in the business?
So in terms of the software, I would bucket that under that we were very, very, very worried because we, at first, Aubrey was, probably not a surprise, we were just running on a simple instance in the cloud, but it wasn't scalable. It wasn't something that you could actually take and, dump, hundreds of school districts on the next day without, going crazy. But we have, that was part of the reason why we launched the business, was to actually, opening up some funding and support to actually develop the platform in a way that it could scale quickly, up, down, everywhere. Yeah, and we brought in we had some really good, some of our first hires were engineers that could do that. So that we're in a good spot. In terms of people, though, yeah, you're kind of highlighting, I think, probably what every business kind of goes through is just like, how do you build up a backbench that you can turn to really quickly? If, for example, for us, if we have, and we have a number of interesting top 10 big school districts in the country looking at us, they come on board. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of customer success support. I'm less worried about the engineering side of things, but certainly the assisting, and it's going to come up in the next part right here. The assistance that's going to be required for launching our product in large school districts. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I had a question too. What you talked about risk and mitigating risk as an educator. What convinced you to take the leap personally?
Oh, cool question. Thanks, Brian. So it's a two-part answer. One is like, if an opportunity like this lands in your lap, you gotta leap, right? Generally, like this doesn't usually happen. You don't have a software platform developed inside a school. We like to say, really, we developed a product that created a business, not had a business that created a product. That's genuinely what happened. So that opportunity was just going to be, it gets back to that lifelong learner. I had the tech director thing down. I could have coasted for, even Chris, my co-founder, we could have coasted for the next 20 years and been cush. But we wouldn't necessarily be learning in this different way. So the opportunity there was really, really, really huge to do it. The other thing to keep in mind, like in the risk, this is just funny. Educators are terrible. It's going to come up here in a little bit, but they're not really good, I think, at doing a risk analysis. Because really, frankly, again, you might be leaving the classroom, but with an opportunity like this, you end up you network like crazy, right? My network now isn't just Southwest Ohio. It's school districts and universities throughout really the United States, and actually starting to extend to other countries. So that risk gets tampered down the more you networked out. Does that answer the question, Brian?
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you guys for pitching those quick questions. So, okay, so I'm going to move on to this next part here about comparing and contrasting. And really what I'm trying to do here is give some insights and some comparing and contrasting that happens with leadership within specifically K-12 education, but maybe a little bit more broadly public service in general, and leadership within a business. I do want to kind of kick off with a really come on. There we go. Okay. Strong caveat here. Look, being open to learn means you can correct your understandings. I'm going to be telling you guys how I'm seeing things and how I'm understanding things. I'm a big thinker, so usually I like to take concepts and just like pound on them. So these are general observations. They don't apply to all educators. They don't apply to all K-12 or all businesses. I'm trying to note the caveats right here, but I do think they're really good guideposts in trying to think this through and how it and how the differences function. You know, I'm going to these observations have shaped my experience, and I've talked to a lot of peers informing these observations. They're also kind of high level. There's far greater detail surrounding them, but due to the time constraints and a lot of nuance, I'm going to skip over a good chunk. I love nuance. I think it's frequently the antidote to dogma, but I'll try not to go too tangential with some of these points. First, the legend, the legacy, the tool that's used by every teacher, K-12, it's the good old compare and contrast. But we're going to try and give this a go, going a little bit of a narrative style. And I want to start right here with incentives. So what is the purpose of K-12 education? It is to educate children. Now, I want to upfront acknowledge that incentives are complex and varied, but I'm definitely simplifying a bit in order to underline a couple key points. What is the purpose? The purpose of education is to educate children, but a big aside. Educating children is, one, fairly abstract. What does that mean? And in K-12 circles has a lot of interpretations. Also, and I really want to point this out, K-12 does far more than educate children. In America, they feed children, they protect children, they provide all sorts of social services for mental and physical health, and they just do so much more. I mean, the school is so critical in so many different ways to the success of a child. I would argue that K-12 education is actually the central institution in caring for most of the children in this country. You might have opinions on that, but that's just how I see it. The purpose of business is to increase shareholder value. Again, some strong caveats. This is a vast simplification, and to be frank, very kind of Milton Friedman-esque view on the purpose of a business. There are variations of purpose. For example, you got B Corps that are committed to social good. But at the end of the day, I would still say, businesses need to make money or they're not going to survive. Which is why I want to go ahead and focus less necessarily on purpose and consider a variation of the question: how do leaders in their institutions thrive and survive, really? In education, and I suspect this is true of a lot of public institutions, you survive based on your ability to navigate the politics of the community and the institution. Because purpose is broadly defined, remember educating kids, soft power is critical. The money to keep the wheels on the bus will usually, frankly, be there. You, the individual, to survive, need to thrive and work with folks like the board, admins, and teachers. Practically, what this means is this tends to favor slow, steady, conservative approaches. And I really want to emphasize that typically is what you see happening. In business, you need money or you don't have a company. This provides exceptional clarity on what you need to do to survive and thrive. Bad ideas really can't sit around and fester. I'm not saying that politics are not a fact here. I get it. We've got boards, we've got investors. There's various levels of accountability that are very, very critical. But my sense is that it pales in comparison to comparing to the importance of what it is in the public sphere. The main point that I'm really wanting to make right here is that the incentives are different. Consequently, so is leadership. And it affects the leaders of business, and it really affects how leaders of businesses need to talk to leaders of public institutions. It's an important context to understand. So that's really one of the key things I've had to learn. Well, actually, rephrase it. That's really one of the key areas that I've brought over from coming from the public side of things over to the private side, and how that level of conversation actually happens. My next insight. Don't move my cheese. Which is a reference to that wonderful children's book, Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know, again, elementary school teachers, education background. But I really do want to start here with the ugh, okay? So here is like in a quick 60-second explanation of students in their interaction with systems from the beginning to the end. We're going to call this student Daisy, and I'm going to give you like a quick narrative of how this works. So first, Daisy enrolls in the school. That's system number 1. Then she's entered into the student information system, system 2. Then Active Directory, system 3. Her old school is contacted for records. This is usually 4 or 5 other systems. If she has an IEP or a 504, more systems. Now we have Google, plus 10 different key applications she needs to be added to, 11 more systems. She and her family are added to the 5 different ways schools communicate with parents and families, which is a complete mess for a different conversation. She's added into a grade book, then an LMS, then a PBIS system, then a graduation pathway system with counselors, state assessments, always key, mental health supports, and finally, do not forget transportation and food services. The point being, there is a ton of complexity here, full of insane inefficiencies. And really, like if you were an outsider coming in, you just ask, why do we do that? Lots and lots of breakpoints. But, and this is important, behind every one of those systems, there is a person or frequently multiple people owning it. It is theirs. And to these people, their work, like many of us, I would guess, their work is part of their identity. The way they work is by extension, a part of their identity. Consequently, changing the way we do things is just really, really hard because you are, in effect, changing identity. No one likes their cheese moved. Again, the incentives are different. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but status quo can really thrive in public institutions. And status quo is a really tough rock to crack. There are some lessons in working with folks when you're talking about how you want to get change happening. These are the lessons that leaders in the public sector and companies selling into the public sector might want to really, really kind of keep key. One is just acknowledge the identity crisis. I've walked into pitches and I've seen that person in the room who thinks they're about to lose their job because you're about to suggest a piece of software that they don't know, and it is terrifying. Empathize. They really, when you start asking questions of them, understand that, hey, they're frustrated. They don't like what they're doing either half the time, all right? They understand that they have a bad tool. And really what you're going after is a win-win. You're about making their lives easier. More efficiency should mean more time to have the agency to do fulfilling work. Granted, some really don't want the agency, but really many do. In fact, I found the majority really care about the broad purpose of education and this is kind of key, when they see the connections to what they're doing and how that actually fulfills the mission and the vision of educating all children, they will contribute to change. It's coming back to some of those, the political aspect of the conversation that you always have to have. Moving on, innovation in education. For my next contrast, I'm going to talk about innovation. Fair warning, the picture is a setup. Just to let you know that. One of the core principles in education is preparing students for the future. Innovation is the key to future success, and there's a lot of current trends to say that say like people have been coming on board to start working in districts called chief innovation officers as titles. You've got Clay Christensen, author of The Innovator's Dilemma, actually write a book called Disrupting Class. Districts spend a good chunk of their public messaging talking points around innovation, how they encourage it, how they're innovative. But really, and I do want to say that like this, it's kind of there's no way to rock it. Schools struggle with innovation. they really, really, really struggle with innovation. The struggle for it, they struggle with it for a variety of reasons, but I refer back to my early point when I talk about risk and who is drawn to education in the first place and the incentives. Innovation means change, and change can be scary, and change can rock the boat. I'll be honest, like, schools really should be one of the safest places to innovate because the risk-reward equation is just so heavily in favor of reward, and it's very low risk. You can have an idea, execute it, and even if it fails, you're still going to have a gig. So it's really, in schools, you would think that you'd actually have a robust environment for innovation. But sadly, you just don't see that happening a lot. In business, you got to innovate or you don't survive. So it's a much more direct connection there on the role of innovation and how it affects your success as a company. Okay, project planning, another observation. Project planning in education is really an odd duck. In K-12, I would say project planning is an afterthought. Why? Because really, in most cases, the leaders who should be doing the project plan actually do a little bit of the project plan, but because they're wearing 8 million hats as a leader, they just get pulled in a million different directions. So they might start something, have it go there, and not be able to return to it because, I don't know, a pandemic hits, right? So you have all these different things that you're constantly being pulled to. Yet I really want to emphasize this: project planning is so powerful. You can sometimes find leaders who really become powerful project planning kings and queens, and they really get things done. There are hundreds of initiatives in K-12, a lot of them coming from the state and the feds. But leaders at the top really succeed in project planning, and really, like, in that project planning, examine the character traits of being inspirational and soft power and empathy and character. But from what does it mean for us as a company? Really, if you are selling software to schools, it's good to think it's really provide as much project planning as possible. In fact, hire people who can do project planning for them. This means folks on your business who understand all the many pushes and pulls and connectivities that happen in a large institution like a K-12 school district. So really want to emphasize project planning, big. I see it done in the private sector like crazy. It's just it's rough. It's really rough in public schools. The last kind of key point I want to emphasize right here in education or the public sphere versus private is relational versus transactional. Education is so rooted in relationships, and frankly, that's a wonderful thing. Businesses are really rooted in relationship. I understand that. Businesses are very highly relational as well. So this is more like an overlap here in the Venn diagram. But transactions really matter. And I would say that they matter more on the private side of the ledger than on the public side. Frankly, like, you can be the best product in the world. Awesome, incredible. People can love you in the district and want using your stuff. But if you can't track the relationship, if you can't track with the relationship side of things, you're going to go down in the next board meeting where someone says, where a board member says, hey, I have this cousin who did this, kind of regularly. So it's just relational. It's just so critical to understanding, how your product is used and purchased within K-12. All right, so I'm gonna go on to part 3 just because it's really short, and then open it up to questions. But basically, I do want to leave with some core conclusions. One is some tips right here, like what I found myself doing to try and understand and learn coming from public to private. First, find those contrasting situations. You don't need to leave a business or your role in a business to find contrasting situations. I'm guessing many of us volunteer at places, or part of churches, or part of civic organizations, wherever where you take leadership roles. Contrast those situations to learn. Reflect. I love writing. I love reflecting. I love thinking. Carve out time to reflect. And really, in that reflection, do a lot of comparing and contrasting activities to try and draw, what are the what are the common and different denominators that are leading to success? Find some shared core axioms. I didn't really cover this much, but really, I mean, I have been trying to learn some core axioms that apply to both. One of the core ones that I have is the root of all conflict is a failure to meet an expectation. It worked really well in the public sector, and it's working really well in private, focusing on expectations. So find some really core axioms to really take with you. And with that, I'm just gonna leave it on this slide and just ask, hey, are there any follow-up questions? Yeah, happy to entertain stories, interactions, any of that stuff. So,
Thank you, Zach. I think you're bridging a world that many of us really value. I never really realized that, but I think we need more people like you who are able to speak both languages. I always value translators in all stripes, and I think you do a great job of doing that. And I think just as a parent, you illuminated a lot of the problems I felt as a parent, and I don't think we often see. Jeff has a question. I have a question. Maybe I'll start with mine, and then we'll go to Jeff's, and I think we have a couple others that we've prepared as well. I just keep thinking about what can people like this audience, mostly technical practitioners, engineers, leaders in the software sphere in West Michigan, but we touch a lot of different parts of the country and the world. What can we be doing to help our partners in the public sphere? And I know you're speaking about education, K through 12, but maybe beyond that too. What would your advice be for those of us who are seeing what you're sharing with us and you're showing us to be beneficial? How can we actually help and not just go in and think we have a bunch of answers?
No, that's a great question. It's also a long answer. But I'm going to try and keep it really short, because I do want to encourage everyone here to very much, and I got a sense from just looking at some of the previous talks that this is kind of a passion shared by the group, that they want to do good, and certainly good by their community, and school is part of the community. From a practical perspective, honestly, I partner and mentor with kids. I didn't go into this right here, but really we have a whole thing called Abre Appathons, where we host events where we take students, come along, we show them how to code in Abre. We get them problem solving, how they want to solve things. One of the best things you can do as community leaders is to create mentorships and pathways for taking kids who are interested in what it is that you do. And I know there's various flavors of companies that hear that and what they do, and bringing them along with you, as well as partnering with the schools who, go in and listen and just ask if you could lay out what are your 5 top problems, from a technical perspective. You're going to get a lot of interesting answers, and it can start the conversation flowing to think about that. And I wouldn't say that about school. I'd also say that about, cities and local governments as well. These folks, look, they're strapped. Again, remember I was talking about safe and comfortable. You're not usually dealing with folks who who've been exposed to different types of thinking, different frameworks and things like that. So bringing in a fresh perspective in a empathetic and supportive way can always be good. But I would encourage that absolutely look for those opportunities, because they are there. Again, when we were looking around, like if we had found businesses, it would have been like, yeah, I can give a developer, 4 hours a week to you guys that can start working on. Oh my gosh, as a tech director, I would have lost my mind and would have been like, I have so many ideas. Now, granted, I don't think I wasn't your typical tech director, but I think you can actually change that concept for them when you do. What problems are you facing? So that's kind of a high level, just concept. But I do like to think about how do we all participate in the village of learning, whether if you are a business or whether you're, a family or any other kind of organization.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, and a follow-up question. What technologies do you think are missing from that junction between public and private and school and technology? What are the things, if you had to give us like 2 or 3 ideas of things you're like, my word, it's like so obvious, this, and this. Do things come to mind for you?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Without going too technical here, but this is what we always laugh about as my co-founder and I, we think about the problems that need to be solved. I think like in the public sphere, people think tech is magic. Like if I kind of like blurt out some general idea, you'll get what I mean and you'll what I need, right? And really like when like I'm gonna kind of approach this a little like design thinking and understanding the problem of the public would go a long ways in helping them. Would go a long ways in helping them because they can't give voice to it very well. They don't understand systems and how they come. Getting in the pragmatic part though is look, a lot of the tech being used in schools, and I think I've worked with city governments too that they're using. It's just clunky, old. You gotta like if you're being hired, your young people being hired, they gotta lose themselves for a couple of weeks to learn how the most asinine ways that these things run. So I think modern, frankly, modern standards and how things are done are just incredibly helpful. In the private sector, you move so much faster. There are gaps in areas where you certainly see lagging, but you just move because you get a return on investment pretty quickly if you go to the head of the pack. So that's where I would like do it. Anything to facilitate, anything to lower in K-12, anything to help teachers focus on what they want to be doing, which is teaching kids, is a home run, right? Because there's, if you can automate processes, come in, like there's just a bunch of, required minutia that comes from states and federal and stuff. Like if you can automate, and a lot of it could be automated to get teachers and administrators to really do what they want to do, and what they really want to be doing is working with kids and teaching them. They don't want to spend 20% of their time. I mean, case in point for COVID, I'll give you this, like your assistant principals and principals, I guarantee they're spending 50% of their time doing contact tracing. Of their job is just tracing where kids went, right? And calling their parents. So a good example. I will say, like, if you guys, let me throw it out there. Like if anyone has like deep questions and then deeper, I would love to have this conversation. There's a lot more ideas that are short, but yeah.
Thank you. Got a question about convergence. Then I want to switch real briefly to innovation while we have you here. I really value your time and the time of our audience here. But what are some trends around convergence that are happening right now in EdTech? And you talk about automation, that laundry list of software systems that a student and really the system has to, manage. Is that getting better, or you see other trends that you're positive about?
People are mad about it, and enough people, it's starting to get critical mass of people getting mad about it, which is great, and advocating for changes. In EdTech, I would say there are a couple trends, convergences that you're seeing happening. I mean, well, one is like they really are trying to solve a little bit of the problem of how do you connect everything? Like really, I mean, the number of EdTech, it's getting fewer and fewer every year. The number of EdTech companies that don't even have APIs that you can use is rather frustrating. So that's definitely starting to happen. People are starting to get the concept of, hey, if you want to know everything about a child, you should be able to connect the different silos together. So I would definitely say that's happening. Obviously, distance learning, hybrid learning, like we've just like there's just been a massive COVID, COVID made it burned the lifeboat for many folk to be like, I can't ignore this anymore. So you're seeing tech trends that are clicking in that actually align to really good education pedagogy, because some of tech is just terrible, and some of it's really, really good at helping kids learn. So I would say that's kind of a big thing. And then there's like the future hype, if you will, of trying to think of things like, augmented reality and what's that going to be like, or, to be quite, not to throw a bone out there to you, right? Like Internet of Things, like what does that mean in education circles? There's a lot, like there are people at the head of the pack who are really starting to try and figure out and translate that. But you always got to remember, you got a teacher back there who's just going to look at you going like, what? You're going to have to bring them along. So.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Last question. Maybe it's a couple of questions here, but I want to talk about innovation, and I think that was something that I know you're passionate about. I think this group is passionate about. And you know, we were talking before, and I think one of your open questions maybe is should schools be their own incubator
Yeah.
innovation?
Yeah.
Or if not, I guess the related question is, if it's not the school, where should that go? Who should be doing the innovation around this?
EdTech innovation in particular?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I mean, all right, so innovation is definitely a complex subject. So just put that out there in front. I want to always get back to this concept of innovation and the tie-in to risk and reward. And if you, I really do think your lead innovation tends to happen when people don't have to worry about risk to a huge extent. Like, and I don't think that applies to the public sphere. I think it applies to the private. So when you're saying outside of the school, where else can that happen? I'm thinking organizations, and again, a lot of this comes down to funding and how do you, when I say risk, a lot of times I'm talking about, like, you know, the baseline risk of just not having to be, you know, not getting a paycheck, right? So thinking it through in terms of, like, if you can truly innovate in an area where, you know, you change the equation of risk reward, that can happen. And you do see a lot of, like, fun, like, partnerships that happen with business and some schools to tackle, getting back to your original question of, like, what can we do, tackle the innovation question. But that frequently focuses in on kids, which by all means, focus on the innovation question with kids. That's great. What's left out very frequently are the teachers and the admins. And they're the ones doing the job, right? So having that conversation about what does innovation look like? What does it do? What are we trying to do? Like, the whole system behind it. In terms of software, I should also be very clear here. Like, when it comes to, like, innovation around teaching or pedagogy, you'll see some pretty cool innovation happening. I should have probably made that distinction. You'll see some pretty cool innovation happening in schools. You'll see innovative teachers really, really succeed. But when it comes to software processes and those kind of things, yeah, I mean, I just don't, like, I laugh. There's another, there's another business leader in the EdTech space I was talking to. And I was like, I don't know why, like, I mean, look at Hamilton. Like, I mean, it's a good example right here. It was a risk to take Chris out of the classroom and look at it from the perspective of, hey, I gotta fill it with a teacher. You know, that's what it's going to cost. However, like, I do wonder, like, if more districts looked at it through that lens of, you know, but look, we saved $500,000 almost, you know, and doing that risk reward calculation. Again, the mission of a school district, though, is to teach kids. It's not to become it's not necessarily to become a business or a profit model behind it. So there's caveats all around.
That's useful. Thank you very much for that perspective. And I think with that, we'll leave it. Thank you very much, Zach, for attending. I know you've given us a lot to think about in a very different perspective, which is very valuable. I also want to thank our sponsor, Brightly. Again, without our sponsors, we couldn't be doing what we're doing, and we couldn't bring wonderful people like Zach into your home. Let's see here. I got to make sure I get the housekeeping correct here before we leave. For details on more information, you can go to GLSEC. You can also go to the Software GR website as well. Our next speaker will be February 13th, and our speaker will be John Krieger, and we hope to see you there. And Zach, again, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the quickest ways is just do Zach or Z Vanderveen. I do Zach, Z-A-C-H, at abre.io. And I would love to talk. If anybody has further ideas, just invite. And, you know, I'm up in West Michigan quite a bit because that's still the Mecca. So
that sounds good. All right. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you all later. Have a good night.